Итак, уважаемые друзья,
Ladies and gentlemen, all those tuning in to the 2021 Startup Village. Ahead of us, we have a very interesting session that will be wrapping up our business program for today. I hope that in these 2 full days you have seen a lot of new things, and now you know that the space race never stops. We have lots of startups participating, big corporations, and even countries, nations, all trying to take the lead. Each and every country and actor in this field has their own preference. Vaccines, digital footprint, remote everything technologies, lots of things here. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I hope that you will make some profit because, well, these technologies are going to be outdated very soon. Keep your eyes peeled, be attentive, and try to predict the future. Only this way you may be sure that you will succeed. We are starting our plenary session, Hitchhiker'S Guide to Innovation, how not to miss out on latest trends in technology. How not to miss out on your future, how to forecast the best trends that which going to disrupt the world. That we'll learn now. And I welcome to the stage the moderator of our session, Kirill Tokarev, Editor-in-Chief, RBC TV. Welcome. And I also welcome to the stage Arkady Dvorkovich, Chairman of the Skolkovo Foundation. We have an online speaker, Dr. Jayshree Seth, Corporate Scientist and Chief Science Advocate at 3M. Kirill, over to you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing the introduction. That will help me with the time. Now, Arkady, let's start. Let's start from the very beginning. Let's start from big things. The 2020 year was a bumpy ride. There were some bad things happening throughout the year. Technology has helped a lot, that's true. I can't say they helped to survive us all, they helped to save the humanity, but they made our lives easier and more safe. What do you think about technologies? Were we prepared for this shock of 2020? Will we be prepared next time? Because for sure, something like that is going to happen again. The future holds a lot of good things for us, but bad things are going to happen to us as well. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Skolkovo. This is our second day today. Welcome to our big village here. I hope you're enjoying this. If we let you down in some sense, well, say it. We always look for feedback because only this can help us be better next time. Good weather is here, even though no technology has any power over technologies. And throughout these 2 days, it's been nothing but miraculously good. Now, to the more serious things. Technologies have helped us a lot. The year 2020 and the year 2021 as well, so far, would have been far more difficult. Thanks to technologies, we could communicate. Throughout all these months, we could communicate, if not face-to-face, but, well, display to display. We could hear each other, see the emotions. We couldn't visit universities, campuses, and schools, but we still continued educating ourselves and getting education from these institutions. The majority of us could get what we needed in time. Medicine, healthcare aid, all the things which we need to stay happy and healthy. We've had a number of success stories. Some companies, and some Skolkovo companies as well, started manufacturing tests to assess the probability of some certain health risks, cardiovascular disease risk. When the pandemic started, these companies retrofitted their equipment to start producing COVID-19 tests. That was not innovation. They readjusted what they did. They just did the same thing as companies in Korea and Europe did. They did that fast, and they provided the necessary tests for people here. Himrar, that company, started producing medicine which has helped lots and lots of people in Russia, helping them to recover from the COVID-19 virus. Another company from Skolkovo helped to purify blood from toxins, helping to save numerous lives. That's just one topic. There's just several examples. We've had a lot of companies who acted agilely, changing their technologies, changing their businesses, and thanks to their competencies and their excellence, thanks to the help from Skolkovo and from the government, they could contribute, they could help our people in our country. In some areas, we've had a lot of good work prepared to be used throughout the pandemic, like education and all the remote technologies. Out of 10 biggest online education companies, 8 of them are actually from Skolkovo.
These companies helped students to continue their studies during the pandemic. I am a father too, and I saw my children studying online. Sometimes there were problems with the internet, and teachers struggled with new technologies at times. So technologies were out there. Sometimes these technologies were even fairly good, but some people were not ready to use those. Sometimes psychologically, I mean, there is this generational gap, and people who are older, they sometimes find it hard to switch to computers. And many university professors, for example, who are pretty senior, they were unable to use these technologies. And that was very sad. Now, speaking about businesses going online, Skolkovo companies and companies outside of Skolkovo offer technologies to ensure the continuity of operations through automation, through remote monitoring, thus minimizing the risks of those few people who had to be present in office or at plants and factories. And many of those technologies that proved to be absolutely crucial during the pandemic, before the pandemic, they were seen as something secondary to the core operation. And we, Skolkovo, we are not investors, but we have our portfolio companies whom we help and assist. And our portfolio, I mean our returns, grew by more than 60%, which means that we made the right bet in the past.
Меня немножко смущает слово «угадали».
You know, you said that you made the right guess when you added those companies into your portfolio. So was it a guess or was it a forecast? Well, Kirill, you always do forecasts. You always do your best to try and gauge what companies will be on the rise in the next 10 or 15 years, but your resources are limited. There is only so much that you can do with forecasting. So if you are able to choose the right company from a plethora of companies, that is a wonderful thing. You cannot invest in all of them. Mr. Dvorkovich, let us then talk about the future. Skolkovo is now accommodating more and more new companies, creating new products and services. So how do these companies will deal with new economic shocks in the future, with new crises? I mean, there are so many challenges out there. How do we deal with them? Well, first of all, many companies today focus on the use of AI to tackle a number of issues. For example, Skolkovo is now the UN partner for AI for sustainable development goals. And sustainable development goals are very broad. They do not only include the environmental issues, for instance, but they are tackling the problems across the board. And the AI technology is indeed a very hot topic today. Because of the pandemic, we are also focusing on healthcare. We now realize how important it is to try and prevent such crises in the future. And probably artificial intelligence can be of help here too. Maybe it will help us to forecast such pandemics on the global scale. Now it is not there yet. Probably it will at some point. On the other side of the spectrum, we have personalized healthcare, where we work with every patient individually, trying to forecast what diseases they might have, what complications they might develop, and how do we tackle those at the early stage, or how do we help them to be on demand after they sustained an injury, a trauma, or another complication of a disease. The fact that we focus on healthcare means that there will be a lot of resources earmarked for that particular sector. It doesn't mean, of course, that all of the projects in this sphere will be 100% successful. Another important area of work that I see today is the urban environment, common spaces, safety and security, logistics, transport. So everything that combined creates the environment where we live. And I think that investors will be looking for new solutions that will help to mitigate the risks that we might run in our habitat. Those are, of course, safety and security, food products, and all of those services should be offered in a very agile mode, because now we cannot tell whether we will be working remotely tomorrow or not, whether there will be another lockdown.
Все, что касается персонализации уже самих технологий.
Now, dwelling on personalization, I've mentioned personalized healthcare, but I think that technologies overall will be getting more and more personalized, because people will be able to use technologies as building blocks, creating services that are specifically tailored to their needs. For example, we see there at our startup bazaar a micro farm, and they grow micro horseradish, and that will be very fashionable. You can have it in your home, this small farm, growing your own vegetables. You don't need much space for that. And that will be economically viable with time. I mean, we cannot predict with a 100% certainty which product will be popular in 6 months or in a year. But what we know is that in the upcoming 10 years, these technologies will be successful. But if you want as an investor to invest in a particular project and be 100% sure that you will have your money back, well, there is no guarantee that that will happen. You have to take risks. And we help companies and investors to mitigate those risks, but we cannot rule out the risks fully. You're right, Mr. Dvorkovich. Innovations are science and not magic. Now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Jayshree Seth. I do hope that you can hear us loud and clear. Dr. Seth?
Yes, I can.
Прекрасно. Добрый день. Давайте поговорим о том, как крупный бизнес,
Wonderful. Let us talk about these huge transnational companies who try and tame innovations, who try and guess which innovations will really take off and which will not. How can major companies remain leaders in this technical world? Are there any innovations that you believe in and that you think will be popular in 15 years or in 50 years or in 100 years?
First of all, спасибо. Добрый день. Это большая привилегия to be at
It is a huge privilege to be at this forum.
I think everyone, like you said, is trying to figure out what is going on around us and how it'll impact what happens next and how do we fit in. So everyone keeps a keen eye on technological advances, regulatory or institutional changes, environmental factors, natural events, demographic shifts, shifts in social attitudes, geopolitical issues. You know, the way I look at it is that it's a mosaic. It's pieces of tiles that need to be put together, sometimes painstakingly. And it's not a puzzle. It's not where each piece exactly sits in one way and everything fits beautifully. No, no. It is truly a mosaic. It's dynamic and it evolves organically as you keep adding the tiles and see the picture emerge. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to pull the tiles together. You need to be able to see the story it's telling and then, of course, act on it. And I think the pandemic has been a great training ground because, just as Arkady just described, it unfolded and the mosaic was literally assembled for us and a lens put on it to magnify the areas where innovation was immediately needed. And we all had to act in this very heightened VUCA environment. I actually have a slide to show you what I mean. Let me pull up my slide here. So the way I like to say it is that 2020 really made the VUCA world of yesterday look tame and manageable. VUCA, as many know, is a term borrowed from the military to often describe the business world as well. You know, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, VUCA. But during the last 18 months, the discussion of vulnerability has completely eclipsed any discussion of volatility. And it's vulnerability, not just of our health, but of communities and companies and countries has been exposed. And of course, the year has been truly unprecedented in its wide-ranging impact, no question there. And complex has given way to contentious. So all subjects are now deemed controversial, and instead of being discussed, they're often being disputed. And then every action, the words, and there is so much rhetoric, it all gets amplified, constantly leading to additional changes. So it's a totally new level of VUCA world out there. And during this time, virtually every individual and every organization had to come up with new ways of thinking. Arkady just talked about it. And innovation is indeed as simple as beginning to think differently. So this rapid change around us is actually a great opportunity. And I think there are 3 distinct actions we can all take now at an individual or organizational level to give ourselves the practice to be more innovative. So let me tell you what I think those are. First is the opportunity to anticipate the new or next normal. You know, given the acceleration of many trends, digital and telehealth and banking and education and retail, you just heard. And what does that mean for the path you are on? And then you need to develop actionable insights that can be executed rapidly in the short term. This is not your normal death by analysis. This is something that has to happen quickly because what may have seemed good strategic decisions for the future have been accelerated, and many require immediate action to stay relevant. Second is that the change around us also calls for honest soul searching, because the pandemic definitely revealed vulnerabilities and shortcomings and also some strengths. All of these can in fact lead to strategic foresight by challenging what you think are old truths. So it's an opportunity to examine if we're adapting, what are we learning, and how are we adjusting our future plans. So take your projects, your platforms, your products, your jobs for that matter, and challenge the old truths around them, and I'm certain opportunities for innovative thinking will emerge. And finally, there is no doubt in my mind that science will vanquish this pandemic. But this brief window of time behooves us to change things within our own operational oversight. things that didn't work well for us during these last 18 months and streamline and simplify processes that helped us add value. So it's a small window of opportunity where we can examine our structures, our systems, our processes, and even change them before the window closes. And it may seem counterintuitive to do it right now with so much change, but it's actually a really good time to take a really good look. What are the systems we all know are in place which are hindering your ability to truly innovate? And I believe this strategy can help jumpstart innovation now. New normal, old truths, and window in time. And if you ask me what are areas of growth, I'm a scientist, and I'm also the chief science advocate for 3M. We're a science-based company. That's our foundational strength. And I can give you my view, and it in fact reflects the view of the global public. So I take you to the 2021 results of 3M State of Science Index. It's a survey we do to understand public perception. And at this moment in time, people have hope. And it's our responsibility to bolster trust and deliver on hope. And I believe that growth will come from exactly these areas: innovation in science and technology to be a hero for good, with efforts at equity and social justice, by leading a path to a sustainable future, and then creating partnerships for innovative solutions. And there is no doubt in my mind that these can be great innovation growth drivers for the next X number of years. So we're seizing the opportunity now for adapting to the new normal, challenging old truths, and taking steps while we are in this window of opportunity. So hopefully that answers that question.
Спасибо, спасибо, Джейши. Друзья, если есть вопросы к нашим спикерам...
Thank you so much, Dr. Seth. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions to our
Вы увидели на экране. Мыслитель...
speakers, please feel free to send your questions via our app. Today we're also joined by Renmer Kutzwell, a futurist, an author, and an inventor.
Нашим спикерам, которые уже выступили.
If you have any questions to Arkady Dvorkovich or Jayshree Seth, please raise your hand and we will give you the mic to ask your question. But please speak to the topic of our discussion.
Как обычно, просьба представляться.
Thank you so much, and please do not forget to introduce yourself. Hello, my name is Roman Sergeyev, a Skolkovo resident.
Аркадия,
My question goes to Arkady Dvorkovich.
книжки по бизнесу. Мы сжимаем смыслы до summary, потому что из того, что
What we do is we make videos based on business books because we now see that people have
мой, наверное,
not enough time to read, and that is why we make videos for them, short summaries of business books.
прямая машина.
Where do you think, Mr. Dvorkovich, we are going? Because Elon Musk is presenting Neuralink. How will we consume information in the future? How will we study in the future? Because we have less time and more information.
Времени будет.
Well, make sure you do a good summary because we will have
Выше ты поднимаешь.
less and less time. You know, I was a government official for many years, and I know that the higher your position is, the shorter summaries you should get, because otherwise you won't have time to do anything.
Прямолинейные, чтобы только по картинкам читать. Можем и тексты, конечно, но
Of course, it should not necessarily be in the form of videos, but still.
второй тренд.
The second trend that we see
Аналитика.
is predictive analytics.
Решений нужен набор из наиболее
To make decisions, we need a set of the most efficient decisions.
дальше человек, принимающий решения, где
Because a person who makes decisions, be it a businessman, a doctor, or a civil servant, makes a decision based on data that they have. And this data should be summarized and reduced to a set of recommendations.
если на шаг технологии переходить, если это не
And if you use chess as an analogy, if it's not a one-step victory, you need to look at what options do you have on the table.
Когда ты в ситуации, где уже нужно принимать решение, это одна история. Когда ты в ситуации, когда тебе нужно
Also, bear in mind that we might have different scenarios. Sometimes you are faced with the stock choice, and sometimes you need to have a detailed strategy where you have some time to think about what your options are. But at the end of the day, you will need to have a very condensed strategy as an outcome of your thought process.
Молодежь, например, потребляет большие, сложно структурированные куски информации.
Thank you, Mr. Dvorkovich. We also need to learn and to teach our young people how to consume big pieces of information in a short period of time. It is true, by the way, that children today consume information in a different way. For example, many popular vloggers today, they make short videos, like 5 minutes videos about some major historic events or
Или это благо?
some very important books.
Давайте еще пару вопросов и
A
пойдем.
couple of questions more, please.
Здравствуйте, Анисия, стартап.
Hello, Anisia, I represent Belletarium. We are a startup. We are currently waiting for verdict on our Skolkovo residency. You know, here at Startup Village, we are learning a lot about major corporations and how they are vetting startups. But can a startup become a unicorn without having to work with venture capitalists?
единорогом
Well, that depends on your definition of a unicorn.
делось. Но у нас нет пока единорогов в том смысле, в котором это
Well, if we talk about market cap definition of a unicorn, we do not have unicorns yet.
единорогов в мире немного.
And unicorns are very few and far between globally, and there are lots and lots of startups.
Точно. У нас только в России их 10.
Only here in Russia, we have around dozens of thousands of startups, and only a couple of unicorns.
Это статистика.
Well, that's some statistics for you.
Небольшой.
So there is a chance, but it is not as big.
Купит крупная компания
Your chance is a big company buying your solution,
венчурного
or
фонда,
maybe a venture fund
потому что это дополнительный инвестиционный
seizing your idea. That's true. That can be your way to get where you want to be. Maybe we'll have our own unicorn. Maybe we'll have a couple of them.
когда
That doesn't matter because we care about each and every success story. We have lots of companies who have been very useful. I mean, their solutions are applied widely in Russia and in other countries. Some of them generated hundreds of millions of dollars. They don't have that high cap of several billion, but they generate millions. That's good enough. Yeah, if we have a question for our overseas guests, you're welcome to ask them. Now, can I just finish?
единорога.
How can we become a unicorn without actually
Что скажете? Слышите нас?
being bought by anyone? That's our question for an overseas guest, please.
I'm sorry not to qualify to comment on this. All I can tell you is that there is no formula. I think that's kind of what Arkady was trying to say is you can go based on what you're seeing are the trends and make sure you understand all the elements of the consumer behavior and the ease of use and all of those things. But, you know, sometimes things are, they defy expectations and sometimes things that you think should don't. So I don't think there's a formula, but keeping the focus, the dedication, and working on the right problem should directionally lead you in the right direction.
Могу только
That's all I
добавить,
can offer as a scientist in the lab.
могу добавить, что конкуренция очень
I can add that competition is also important. If we have only consumers or the state or one big bank calling the shots, that's not going to be good. You won't have any unicorns. Unicorns can be born only when you have competition. Yes, it's hard to argue that. Now, can I ask you also a question, if I may, Jayshree?
Графической какой-то
These graphical things and summaries of big information pieces is interesting, but how do you manage talents? They say that people is oil, like new oil. talent management is not only about HR solutions, that's something bigger than that now. So how do you invest in people? And what do you invest in? What do you try to find in that? How do you find new information? How do you teach people to learn new information? Hard skills, soft skills. What is it that you are looking for? What is the optimal mix?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And in this rapidly evolving technological and digital and VUCA world, adopting and maintaining the right skills almost feels like an impossible task. And I've given this a lot of thought, and I believe that the only way to sort of train the workforce and even train ourselves as individuals to better adapt to the evolving world is more about the mindset. And if I was to boil it down to 6 skills, I will share with you what I shared not last year. It's funny you say last year because 2020 was just a blur. But in 2019, I was actually in Kazan, Russia for the World Skills event, and I was asked the same question. So I'll tell you the answer that I gave there, that there are 6 skills that are very critical. And you'll see I draw inspiration for these from what famous people have said some many years ago. And that's, as an example, the first one. I think a right skill is to be able to train your mind to see these uncommon connections and build on them. Constantly be doing that. And the way I see it becomes easier if you study the science of art and the art of science, using Da Vinci's words here. Many critical innovations that will shape our landscape will be at the confluence of different fields. So they will require the breakdown of traditional thinking and silo mentality. So that's very important. The right skill is also be able to strike a balance between knowledge and experience. And that's how you get the real learning. It's about know-how and knowledge. So you can gain the knowledge, the facts and data and information, but you also need to have the know-how, the knowledge of how to do something. And that is becoming more and more critical. And I tell my children all the time, you can get all this information from the internet, but you really know how to do this. Another right skill is to consistently exercise individual initiative. And I think that is the imperative, whether it's for innovation or imagination and inspiration. And all of you who are there right now on the grounds of Skolkovo Foundation, you are the kind of people who have exercised individual initiative. And that's important even in a large organization, because it often starts with the motivation, the drive, and the hard work of a single person to take that initiative to achieve something. There's actually a great Anna Pavlova quote that talks about that, the famous Russian ballerina. Another right skill that will be very, very critical, I believe, is to be able to commit to lifelong learning. It's about learning, unlearning, and relearning. And can't be said enough. This is a direct quote from Alvin Toffler. He was a great American futurist who's known for discussing modern technologies. And I know today you're going to hear from Ray, another great futurist, and you'll hear similar things from him. So it's so true that it is very important to understand that whatever you have learned, you may need to unlearn or relearn. Another skill to hone is influencing skills. Influencing skills. Feeling empowered to take action and influence others to do the same. So it all is about leading from your own rung of the ladder. You really don't have to climb to the top of the ladder to lead and now say, okay, now I'm going to start leading. No, this is getting to be more and more apparent how important it is to lead from where you are. Another right skill is to never forget the human element in everything we do. At the end of the day, it's about society and it's about sustainability. It's about seeing the big picture through a lens of humanity in all its diversity and all its unity. And I truly believe that the application of science and technology with advancement of our skills and capabilities and empowerment of diverse talent is the key to a sustainable future for humans. And we need to remember that. And I can quote my fellow panelist Ray here, our technology, our machines is part of our humanity. And the way I like to say it after giving my spiel is that the real shtick is STEM, science, humanities, technology, engineering, and math. So let me actually show you what I mean by that. I can share with you the slide that I created for the 6 skills. So here we go. If you can see that, here they are. The word skills, in my view, spells the right skills for the world of the future. And these are studying the art of science and science of art, know-how and knowledge, and having the right balance, taking individual initiative like you all are doing, learning, unlearning, and relearning, and committing to that, and leading from your own rung. You don't have to wait for somebody to tell what to do. We have to all lead from where we are. And then keeping society and sustainability in the forefront. And Arkady already mentioned this, the idea of sustainable world and sustainable development goals. So to answer your question, I think these are the skills that I would bet on for the future.
Спасибо большое, друзья.
Thank you so much. Now, any more questions? If you have any questions, just raise your hand. We have 2 questions at the same time. Okay.
Огромная просьба представить.
Please introduce yourself and say to whom you address your question. My name is Alexander. My question is for, I think, Arkady. Yeah. So we are here discussing
Будущее, как
future, how we will be growing and developing.
по поводу альтернативного сценария. Вот мы
And I have a thought. There is an alternative scenario to all this. The US,
$20 триллионов.
they have around $20 trillion of GDP. China is currently kept at 17.
Достаточно там
But it's not been like that always. China, not so long ago, was way worse economically than today.
20 лет.
It has been growing fast. For 20 years, it's been skyrocketing. I think that is
Страна там, да,
a very good example. China was a good
там 15%.
point of application for your investments. It generated huge revenues. Now look at Russia. $1.5 trillion.
10 раз.
Compared to China, that's huge difference. That's a big gap.
При этом у нас
And
одинаковые, да,
our territory is the same. We have the same kind of resources.
талантливые.
We have talents, just like China. Maybe our population is not that big, but, well, we can use automation to
Вот этого
somehow compensate for that. How do we bridge that gap? How do we, Russia, become one of the leading economies, GDP-wise?
на мой взгляд, это интересно. Вот,
That's a good question, right? And I thought that this scenario will play out, and we will, thanks to innovation, become, well, bigger and stronger economically. In your opinion, is that possible? Can that make happen? What kind of investments should we be doing to make that happen? And where should we invest? Skolkovo? Maybe some other platform could be that silver bullet. I don't really get what you want to ask me about.
Красивым.
Это хорошо.
Probably he wants to know how to become big, rich, and beautiful. I don't know. I think we just should stay the way we are today. We just continue being ourselves, follow our own path.
Я считаю себя достаточно
You
красивым.
know, I think I'm handsome. I'm healthy and handsome. I'm quite satisfied with where I am and with who I am right now. Maybe we could ask this person to elaborate, because I really didn't get the question.
Может быть, немножко так
Sorry for being
ответ.
a bit humorous about this. But here is what I can tell you. Read Kapitsa.
Убедительно доказывал, что
He said it with a lot of confidence that country is rich because it has huge population. That's 100% correlation.
даже там 50-летний
In the long-term perspective, the population defines the well-being of the country. 100 or 200 years forward, it's all about population. For a small country, that's a sad, very sad insight, but it's true. Our population is 140 million. China has a lot more.
покупательной способности или
Purchase power parity, or GDP,
в целом
currency exchange rates, it's all very different. And by the way, as for PPP, we have higher GDP than in China.
выражение
Well, absolutely,
там не
in absolute, the GDP is not that big, but the purchasing power parity is better than that of China.
вот
You know, there is that joke
надо сделать
about a dog which sits and thinks, like, how do you make weather better? I want
погода
the sun to be shining brightly.
в 10 раз за сколько
That's the same. How do we increase our GDP by 10 times in 15 years? I don't know. How can you increase your GDP by 10 times in 15 years? I don't know. If you do that, you'll be awarded with the Nobel Prize, no less. Nobel Prize for peace. I mean, I don't know, because that's incredibly. Sorry for being maybe a little bit rude about this, but I think that's your question, and that's what I have to tell you.
И у моих коллег, иначе они не
My colleagues and I,
были бы моими коллегами.
we're always very ambitious. It's good to be ambitious. We want everything now,
Стараемся следовать
but we are also aware of the situation of the market. We know that it's all baby steps. Step by step, we are making the world a better place.
практики и теории.
We know that we need to combine theory and practice, and sometimes small steps is the right way.
Улучшать мир вокруг себя.
We are trying to make the better place, and we are committed to it.
Мне кажется,
Okay, thank you. I think that answer deserves an applause. Now I give the floor to our guest, who is online with here, Ray Kurzweil. I think he needs no introduction.
нашли время принять участие.
Ray, hi. Thanks for finding time to be with us today.
С одной стороны, простой вопрос задать, а с другой
I want to ask you something. It's both a simple and a difficult question. We've been discussing how we can hop on that train of innovation, how to stay ahead of the game technologically. You're an entrepreneur, so could you give us a piece of advice? How do we not miss on all the latest trends? How do we find that silver bullet to all our problems and get maximum success?
Well, thanks for inviting me here to the 9th annual Startup Village. I always enjoy speaking to entrepreneurs, so this is a very special place to be. I understand you actually have 5,000 people watching today. That's terrific. Also looks like a very nice weather. We have a nice weather here in Boston also. I've been researching and writing about the evolution of technology for decades, like 50 years. And one essential lesson that I've learned early in my career is that timing is critical for everything, from inventions to investments to romance. Even the best invention will fail if it's released at the wrong time. And if you release an invention too early, it won't work. If you release it too late, someone else will be successful with it. So that's why I began to research trends in information technology so that I could make better decisions in the moment based on really data-driven predictions for the future. So what my research has clearly shown is that technology has been advancing exponentially for over 100 years. It does not go evenly. If you look at what happened in the last 10 years, it's not going to give you an estimate for the next 10 years. It's going to go even faster. Our forebears expected the future to be pretty much like their present, which had been pretty much like their past. They were likely to thought, gee, if I continue on this path and that predator up ahead continues on its path, we will intersect, so I better change my course. And this linear approach to anticipating the future, it worked well enough so that it became hardwired in our brains. It's our intuition to think linearly, even though progress is actually moving at an exponential rate. So if you count 30 steps linearly, 1, 2, 3, 4, you get to 30. If you count 30 steps exponentially, 2, 4, 8, 16, you get to 1 billion. That's a really significant advance. I mean, think of your cell phone. It's literally 1 trillion times more capable than 20 years ago. And that's the progress we've actually seen in the price performance of computing since I was an undergraduate in college. The paradigm shift rate is now doubling every decade. So the 21st century will see 20,000 years of progress at today's rate. Computation, biotechnology, knowledge of the human brain, human knowledge in general are all accelerating at an even faster pace, generally doubling price performance, capacity, and bandwidth every year. And I'll be showing some charts that show that these trends are continuing to grow exponentially. Thinking linearly causes us to get blindsided by exponential progress. And yet many people fail to consider this accelerating pace of change. I'll give you an example. We had a genome project to collect the human genome, and after 7 years, 1% of the genome had been collected. So a lot of early critics said, I told you this wasn't going to work. It took 7 years to do 1%. It's going to take 700 years to finish. My response was that the project was actually right on schedule. That 1% is only 7 doublings away from 100%. It had been doubling every year. And indeed, it was finished 7 years later. That exponential progress has continued since the genome project ended. Decoding that first genome cost over $1 billion. It now costs under $1,000. And every other aspect of what we call biotechnology, understanding the genome, modeling it, simulating it, most importantly, reprogramming it, is all progressing exponentially. In the next 10 years, we're going to see artificial intelligence learn and master every human skill one after the other. The future is coming much faster than you think. So my advice is to follow your passion, question outdated linear assumptions, and be ready to adapt to exponential change.
Рэй, я знаю, у вас есть презентация.
Ray, I know you have a presentation with you. You prepared something special for us. Is it true? Do you have something to share? We are all ears waiting for this presentation.
Yeah, well, I've got a few ideas I can share with you. So, as many of you in the audience are entrepreneurs and inventors, I thought I'd start by explaining what inspired me to become an inventor, and that started very early. The story begins when my grandmother, Lily Bader, showed me her manual typewriter when I was 5 years old. So I became totally fascinated with the device because I saw it as a magical machine. It could actually take a blank piece of paper and turn it into something that looked like it came from a book. So I studied every mechanism inside of it, at least to what a 5-year-old was capable of doing. Each key connected through a sequence of levers to each typing key, the return carriage, mechanisms that controlled spacing, and so on. I became a real expert on this typewriter. The typewriter was really a defining moment in my path to becoming an inventor. I mean, I actually remember this. And while other kids were wondering what they wanted to be, teacher or police officer, I always had this conceit. I knew what I wanted to be. So my parents gave me an erector set, which had little mechanisms, just like the typewriter. At that point, I began to build my inventory of small mechanisms. So I'd go around the neighborhood and I'd gather broken bicycles, broken radios, take them apart, add them to my inventory. I had this idea, if I could just figure out how to put them together, I could solve any problem. This was an era where parents would actually let their 5-year-olds go through the neighborhood and build this kind of inventory. I eventually built a go-kart, which became my transportation. And I remember actually showing my collection to some very old girls. I think they were 10. And they said, wow, you have a real rich imagination. So that's how I got started. A little bit later, when I was 12, I discovered the computer. You might not think discovering a computer at 12 years old is not so amazing. I mean, got a grandson who's 9, who's studying how to program. But back in 1960, when I was 12, there were only 12 computers in all of New York City. And I was lucky enough to have access to one of them during the midnight shift at a hospital in Spanish Harlem. So I had the midnight to 8 a.m. shift. Probably not the safest place to walk around in the middle of the night. And when it got to a certain point, there were front lights of the computer, and those front lights would dim. And I thought, the computer's deep in thought. And I began to wonder, how does what the computer is doing relate to what people do when we're deep in thought? That's when I began to wonder what programs shape human thinking. So when I was 14, I wrote a paper presenting my thesis on how human intelligence works. I described a collection of pattern recognition modules that could learn, remember, recognize, and implement a pattern. These modules were organized into a vast hierarchy created by our own thinking. As part of the project, I built a computer and wrote a program for it that could find distinct patterns in the music of famous composers, such as Mozart and Chopin, and then write original melodies in the same style. I submitted the project to something called the Westinghouse Science Talent Search. I became one of the 40 finalists. Went to Washington, got to meet President Johnson at the White House. And from that point on, I've given a lot of thought to how intelligence works, and specifically how to emulate intelligent functions with computers. So I'd like to go through a few charts that show exponential growth of technology, because that has really defined the progress in computers. This one shows the growth of computation over the past 100 years. The data points represent calculations per second per constant dollar, going back to 1908. So this is a logarithmic graph, so a straight line represents exponential growth. People look at this and they say, oh, that's Moore's law. But actually, these data points started decades before Gordon Moore was even born. And in 1975, nobody referred to Moore's law, not even Moore. There were no computers on chips at that time. It was in 1975. It was at that time that I began to think about the exponential growth of computation. So I put these computational technologies on a graph and extended it, forming the basis of my predictions. I expected future processes to fall on this line. So what happened? It went on a perfect straight line, which is actually exponential growth, because this is an exponential chart. 45 years later, this has been the result. Perfect exponential growth of computation that started in 1908. We see exponential growth actually in all areas of information technology. Here's the speed of telecommunications. We processed a few characters per minute using Morse code over AM radio a century ago. Today, it has multiplied 1 trillion-fold for the same cost. The total number of bits shipped each year is basically doubling every year, so we can ship a better product each year for less money. This is actually deflation, not inflation, it's deflation. And this is actually what's controlling inflation, because lots of products are governed by this deflation. And in fact, everything is going to become controlled by this kind of deflation. So this is deflation on the order of 50% per year. It underlies every aspect of our technology, not just bits of memory. Even before we had electronics, this deflationary process existed and has made every aspect of human well-being better over the decades and centuries. However, people's understanding is the opposite of actual progress. People think that things are getting worse when they're actually getting better. Probably spend too much time watching the news, which focuses on bad news. And there is bad news, but we ignore the good news. I've been accused of being an optimist, but if you have to be an optimist to be an entrepreneur, because if you knew all the problems you'd encounter, you'd probably never start any project. I think it's important for people to recognize that we are making progress in every aspect of our well-being. I have data showing progress in every aspect of well-being worldwide. For example, declining poverty around the world, longer life expectancy, income, literacy rates, and education all around the rise, and the spread of democracy around the world. I have multiple charts that show this data and could give a speech on this topic alone. But today I'm going to focus on the underlying driving force behind current and future progress, artificial intelligence. So I've been in the AI field for over 55 years. And while I've been optimistic about its progress over my lifetime, it's especially gratifying to see that we now have both the algorithms and the computational capacity for AI to learn just about everything. It's only with enough computational power that neural nets can do anything impressive. So we had neural nets going back. I actually saw the first neural net in the late 50s. It didn't really do very much. You really had to believe in it. Now they're actually performing fantastic miracles. It's only with enough computational power that neural nets can do anything impressive. And it's only in the last 3 years that this has become feasible. So look at this graph. This is, again, the amount of computation devoted to training the best computer models since 2012. And since 2012, it's doubled, not every year, but every 3.5 months. Even with increasing price performance, that's a 300,000-fold increase since 2012. This is much more than Moore's law. Neural nets up until recently have not performed very well because they were not given sufficient computation. While computational algorithms have progressed, it's this recent increase in computational ability that is key. This graph was created in 2018, but the last 2 years we've seen the same trend continue. And I actually had a debate with my mentor, Marvin Minsky, and he was saying it doesn't matter how much computation you have. We could make a Pentium, which was the chip that controlled computers 30 years ago, and we could make that as intelligent as a human if we had the right algorithms. And I said, there's no way we could do that. And we had a big debate at one of MIT's largest debate halls. And neither of us could win. I was saying we need enough computation, but I didn't have enough computation. He didn't have the right algorithms, and so we couldn't continue this. It's only in the last few years that we can actually show that this is true. These feed-forward neural nets with enough computational power are showing that they can master any skill when either we have examples of how humans solve the problem, or two, we can simulate the world that the challenge lies in. And basically every human skill falls into these two categories. So a few years ago, for example, AlphaGo Zero is one example of this. Although it was only programmed with the basic rules of the game of Go, not any additional human information about the game, it only took 3 days of playing itself to learn how to defeat every human player. Now, people are quick to dismiss board and card games as being simple, and yes, the rules are fairly simple, but to play Go well requires complex strategy and an ability to anticipate what your opponent is going to do. Of course, simulations can be much more complicated. Take, for example, simulations used to diagnose diseases. At a speech I gave last year, I predicted that we would soon have a neural net that would achieve what a doctor can do in radiology, maybe within a year or two. After all, we have the data that links radiology exams to related diagnoses for millions of cases. Very shortly thereafter, it's like 2 weeks later, something called ChessXNet was trained on 14 diseases, on 100,000 frontal view X-ray images, on a 121-layer convolutional neural net. It then defeated every doctor that it was compared to in accurately diagnosing cases. Other radiology conversion networks have shown similar capabilities. So deep learning works in other complex situations. For example, take the very ambiguous and extensive world of driving a car. All kinds of things can happen when you're driving, including another car suddenly stopping or coming toward you, the wrong way on a one-way street, or a child chasing a ball into the street. What Waymo has done is to create a self-driving software for self-driving cars while having human monitors participate in all their rides. Every aspect of these rides is recorded. And from all of these surveys, a very comprehensive simulator has been created. Now that Waymo's cars have driven 20 million miles on public roads, the simulator can host a virtual car and make it go tens of billions of miles in the virtual space. And with this experience, the performance of self-driving cars will go way beyond what actual drivers can do. One of the primary goals of AI is to simulate biology by combining its powers with biotechnology. This is now allowing us to find examples of biochemical problems and test them in hours rather than years. So recently, researchers at Flinders University in Australia, they created a new flu vaccine. They used a biology simulator to create, in the computer, trillions of chemical compounds. And then they used another simulator, also on the computer, to see which compounds would be useful as immune-boosting drugs against the disease agent. They now have an optimal flu vaccine, which is being tested. Otherwise, we'll rely on simulators rather than human testing. The US Federal Drug Administration is actually now accepting simulator results instead of human results and testing new vaccines. As these simulators get richer, we'll trust them to do the testing literally in hours or days rather than years. Now, the Moderna vaccine was partly done this way. They used a computer to test billions of RNA sequences to determine what would go in the COVID-19 vaccine. And they actually designed that vaccine in a few days. And then it took another 9 or 10 months to test it in humans, but it had already been determined. As our biology simulators get more general, they should work on all biological interventions, particularly as we go through the 2020s. We have an accurate simulator. We can use neural nets to devise an optimal strategy for any disease. So AI is now taking on one of the biggest scientific challenges that exists, protein folding. Proteins make up the majority of our bodies. They determine which pharmaceuticals will succeed and which will fail. In order for scientists to find new effective medications, they need to be able to predict the shape of proteins. Our genome produces a one-dimensional string of amino acids that fold up into proteins. You can actually see them coming out, and they're in a linear sequence. But it's the final three-dimensional shape of the protein that determines how it will function. Only a small number of researchers have even attempted to master the intricacies of predicting protein folding. So in 2016, Google's DeepMind created AlphaFold, an AI they trained on 170,000 proteins from public repository for 2 weeks. After only a short time, it was able to predict each protein structure. So a couple years later, 2018, AlphaFold was compared to the leading protein folding predictors, including both human and earlier machine approaches. And it placed a prominent first out of 98 competing programs, having accurately predicted the shape of 60% of the proteins in the test. More recently, in 2020, AlphaFold 2 accurately predicted the three-dimensional shape of almost 90% of the proteins. This made international news. And recently, now they won the test, predicting 100% of all the proteins. So we're making fantastic progress on that. If we can predict protein structures, medicine will be radically transformed. Scientists will be able to develop proteins with specific functions. For example, proteins that will simulate our immune system to fight cancer, for example. Recently, the best Go player in the world, Lee Sedol, considered a world intellectual leader, declared that he's not going to play Go professionally anymore because he feels that no matter how hard he tries, he'll never be able to beat an AI at the game. As each year passes, humans don't change very much, but computers do keep advancing, and their progress will continue to be exponential. So we can expect technological advancements next year to be even greater than this year. And that progress is going to continue into the future exponentially. There's still a few things missing before superhuman AI emerges. But all of these are being worked on in labs around the world. One is to combine multiple skills. So Marvin Minsky was my mentor. He wrote a book called Society of Mind. It expresses the idea that humans have both simple and complex ideas. We use them both, and we combine them in artful ways, and we learn how to combine them. So over the next year or two, we'll see AI take over one human capability after another. And by the late 2020s, we'll see AI blend all of these skills into a human-like capability. So if we have, say, 1,000 skills, there's no reason why a neural net can't master them all. And combining them is just one more thing for an AI to learn. I believe human AI is only about a decade away. The progress in AI this past year has surpassed even my optimistic expectations. One thing you can say is that a year of quarantine has created time and space for AI engineers and developers to focus on their work and make significant progress. I've certainly seen that at Google. But I don't think we can credit the progress we've made just to this. It has to do with using large-scale models made possibly by the recent increase in computational power. In 1950, Alan Turing introduced the Turing test, which tests a computer's ability to emulate a human so convincingly that it appears to be human itself. I've written that once an AI passes the Turing test, our perspective about technology will change. We'll think of AI as being equal in every way to a human. But what actually will happen, once an AI passes the Turing test, that same machine will possess skills way beyond human capabilities. We're actually going to have to dumb it down to pass the Turing test. To successfully pass the test, AI will have to dumb itself down to a human level in order to be convincing. So I wrote about this in my first book, The Age of Intelligent Machines, which came out over 30 years ago in 1989. At that time, I felt that a computer would pass a Turing test sometime between 2010 and 2040. We're in that period now. In my book, The Age of Spiritual Machines, which came out in 1999, I narrowed my prediction to a specific year, 2029. Now, that was so alarming to people at Stanford University, to their AI department, that they organized a global conference and invited AI leaders from around the world to talk about it. About 80% of the AI leaders that attended agreed that a computer would pass the test, but not within 30 years. The average prediction was within 100 years. But I've continued to predict 2029. And the Singularity is Near, which came out in 2005, also predicted 2029. I've always figured that I would find an AI that might pass a Turing test, say around 2027. I'd submit it and we'd pass the test by 2029. We're beginning to see things that might pass it. It's not clear. I still continue to say 2029, but we're actually getting pretty close. I'll give you one example. Over the past year, something called GPT-3 has been proven to be pretty interesting. It's an autoregressive language model. It uses deep learning to produce human-like text. And this was not feasible a year ago. There's something called GPT-2, but when it tried to formulate text on its own, it was not convincing. Now, you can ask it any question you want, and some of the answers are not so convincing. Some of them are very convincing. and it's very difficult to distinguish it from text written by humans. There's similar breakthroughs happening in other companies. It's quite remarkable that GPT-3 can write new original text that was not feasible a year ago. So I brought this here, I can read it to you. So GPT-3 was asked, how do we become more creative? And you can ask it anything. And again, some of the answers are convincing, some are not, but here's one that was actually very good. And this could not have been done a year ago. I've been in this field 55 years, and we could not do this up until a year ago. So GPT-3 wrote, I think creative expression is a natural byproduct of growing up in a diverse world. The more diverse the world is, the more you get exposed to different people, to different opportunities, to different places, and to different challenges. And the more diverse that is, the more likely you'll be able to put the dots together to form something new. And in many ways, I think if you want to be creative, you have to go for it. If you want to be a writer, you have to write. If you want to be a musician, you have to create music. So that's something we never heard before up until a year ago. And it goes on quite intelligently. So compare this to what we created in natural language a year ago. There's really no comparison. If we can make this much progress in what year, what will we do a year from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now? In my opinion, AI will generate novels that could win prizes and so on. GPT-3 can also write code that works. You can describe what you want the code to work, and it'll write code. Today it's fairly simple, but what is it going to do a few years from now? Another challenge in AI development is understanding common sense language, or the assumptions that humans make about the world that are not stated because, well, they're so obvious. All of these assumptions are covered over and over again in text on the web. Once AI can truly comprehend what a statement is about, it will be able to gather all common sense knowledge that exists on the web. So this will all happen, in my opinion, by 2029. The current rate of progress is more than enough. We can also understand some things in the web that we couldn't do a year ago. Keep in mind that the progress will continue to accelerate. These AI machines are brain extenders, just like all technology extends our natural capabilities. I mean, who here could build the house that you're in now, or a skyscraper with your bare hands? We've created machines that are muscle extenders that allow us to create these buildings. They didn't exist a few thousand years ago. And now we're creating artificial intelligence that are brain extenders. And extending our brains to the cloud is the next step in human evolution, just as learning to use tools was for our ancestors. I mean, this is my phone. This communicates with the cloud. It has a certain amount of capability, but it goes way beyond that when it communicates with the cloud. And if I leave home without it, I feel like I've left half my brain, or maybe more than half my brain at home, so I have to go back and get it. We'll have that right in our brains to begin with. I think when we get to the 2030s, we'll use nanorobots, robots that fit into our red blood cells, to go into our brains through the capillaries, provide wireless communications between our neocortex and the cloud in the same way that your smartphone has wireless communication with the cloud. And just like your smartphone amplifies its capabilities by connecting to the cloud, we'll do the same thing with our neocortex. This is a 2030s and 2040s scenario. Our thinking will become a hybrid of biological thinking and non-biological thinking in the cloud. It does that already with our phone, but it'll go directly from our brain. So this expansion of our intelligence will no longer be limited by a fixed enclosure, our skulls. It will rely on an information processing substrate that's millions of times faster than the one used by our biological brains. It'll be free to grow exponentially, ultimately expanding our intelligence billions fold. Remember what happened the last time we added more neocortex? When we became humanoids and evolved the frontal cortex? We invented, well, what did we invent? We invented language. We didn't have that before, and art, and science. When we do it again by extending our neocortex to the cloud, we'll add additional levels of abstraction. As a result, we'll invent new means of expression, even more profound than our art and technology of today. So our thinking will become increasingly non-biological as we extend it in the cloud, and as the cloud becomes more powerful. Digital processes are inherently backed up. So if you lose your phone, you don't lose any of the information in the cloud. And even if somebody blows up a data center, it's repeated, so you don't lose anything. So we'll therefore be able to back up our mind file, or at least most of it. Being backed up is not an absolute guarantee of information, but it should be clear to anyone who's ever lost a file, but it does provide another layer of protection. So I don't like to speak about immortality, but rather indefinite extensions to the existence of our mind file. The mind file is not just an abstraction. There's literally information in our brains, which defines our memories, our skills, our personality, and it's not backed up today. Its survival is dependent on the survival of one piece of hardware, the brain. So being able to back up our mind file, or most of it, will provide significant added protection. Intelligent technologies are not going to sweep in and displace us like they are often portrayed in the movies. Ever since we picked up a stick to reach a higher branch, we've used our tools to extend our reach, both physically and mentally. The fact that we can take a device out of our pocket today and access virtually all human knowledge with a few keystrokes extends who we are. The computation that once fit in a building now fits in your pocket. And what now fits in your pocket will fit inside a blood cell and will be far more powerful. That's how we're going to merge with the intelligent technology that we're creating. And as a result, our intelligence, both logical and emotional, will vastly expand. We'll become funnier, sexier, smarter, more creative, more innovative, better providing the next product. Machines are enhancing our ability to be creative in every way. Technology is a democratizing force, and as price performance continues to double every year, we'll have more powerful tools for less money at our fingertips. So if you think about how innovation can be done by really small people, small children, in fact. Google was created by a couple of kids in a college dorm room with $1,000 laptops. The same was true of Facebook. A kid in Africa with a smartphone has access literally to more information than world leaders had 20 years ago. As information technology takes over one industry after another, agriculture, manufacturing, medicine, etc., we'll have more opportunities to explore our interests and continue further innovation. If you go back 200 years ago, 80% of everybody who worked in agriculture. Today, that's 2% in the United States, Russia, and Europe. And yet we actually have more jobs than we had before because we're basically creating new jobs by combining with the machines we've created. Take, for example, three-dimensional printing. As 3D printing becomes more widespread, it's revolutionizing the manufacturing industry. Inexpensive and fast prototyping is now common with 3D printing. Engineers can design a new part on their computers, hold a 3D printed model in their hands within minutes, a process that might have taken weeks with previous technology. This allows for rapid cycles of testing and modification for a fraction of the cost of old methods. And as a result, people with good ideas but relatively little money can bring their innovations to the marketplace and benefit society. So what does this all mean for the economy? Soon 100% of the value of all products and services will be made up of software and related forms of information. Just take a the deflation rate for information technologies, both hardware and software, is about 50% of the year if you're in the computer area, but that's gradually influencing just about every other aspect of the economy. The portion of the economy comprised of information technology is growing exponentially, and within a decade, the bulk of the economy will be dominated by information and software. I spoke with Christine Lagarde. She's chair of the International Monetary Fund a few years ago at the IMF's annual meeting. She agreed that the digital world is amazing, but pushed back by saying, yes, it does a lot of things, but you can't wear information technology. You can't eat information technology. You can't live in it. And my reaction is that's all going to change over the next decade. Information technology will take over one industry after another in the near future. We'll be able to print out clothing using 3D printers. There'll be lots of cool open source designs you can download for free. We'll still have a fashion industry, just like we still have a music and movie industry, even though there's a lot of music and movie that's free. There'll be coexistence of free open source products and proprietary products. We'll be able to create food inexpensively using vertical agriculture, and we'll grow through in vitro cloning of muscle tissues. The first hamburger to be produced this way has already been eaten. Our economy will become a coexistence of proprietary forms of information and free open source forms. Ultimately, the ripple effect caused by exponentially advancing technology will touch every aspect of our lives and all of people's basic needs, and will be met through open source of information. So I've already talked about health and medicine becoming an information technology. Let me give you another example. Energy. The cost of environmentally friendly, renewable energy has been dropping exponentially. We're applying increasingly sophisticated technologies to the design of the underlying materials and mechanisms. So for example, over the past decade, we've been using supercomputing for material discovery for both solar cells and energy storage. And in recent years, deep neural nets have been used for this as well. As a result of the ongoing cost reductions, the overall amount of energy obtained from renewable sources, for example, like solar, wind, geothermal, tidal, biofuels, is doubling every 4 years, and so should reach 100% by the early 2030s. The growth rate for solar energy is even higher. Renewable energy in general will have the capacity to meet all of our energy needs, ultimately at low cost and at no environmental impact. Once we have inexpensive energy, we'll be able to easily convert the amount of dirty and salinated water we have on the planet to usable water. As I touched on earlier, we're headed towards another agricultural revolution. From horizontal agriculture that started 10,000 years ago to vertical agriculture, where we will grow very high quality food in AI-controlled buildings. These will recycle all nutrients and end the ecological disaster that constitutes contemporary factory farming. As 3D printing technology becomes less expensive and more advanced, people will be able to create a wide array of objects for themselves. We'll no longer need vast shipping worldwide, which means environmentally harmful emissions will be radically reduced. 3D printing will also reduce waste and garbage, light and noise pollution, toxic dust, traffic disruption, and hazards to workers. As you can imagine, the exponential growth of technology is going to change the way we work and view employment. By the early 2030s, providing for your family's basic needs will become relatively easy because, as I've said, products and services will become information technologies and undergo drastic deflation. In about a decade, it will be inexpensive to live at a level that's considered luxurious today. AI has already eradicated many jobs near the bottom and the middle of the skill ladder, and the trend will pick up speed over the next decade. Most of our new jobs require more sophisticated skills. As a whole, our society has moved up the skill ladder, and this will continue. But as AI soars past the capabilities of even the most skilled humans, people worry that we will be left behind. Historically, humans have had to compete with each other to meet the physical needs of life. But as we enter an era of abundance, when material necessities are available to everyone, our main struggle will be for purpose and meaning. This is already evident in the generation now deciding on careers. So I mentor and speak to many young people, and their focus really is on forging a path that is meaningful, whether pursuing creative expression through the arts or helping to overcome the grand challenges that humanity has struggled with for hundreds of years. In the future, new opportunities will include novel and more creative business models for earning a living other than traditional jobs. We need to expand our definition of employment. Many opportunities created by technological change fall outside the bounds of old jobs. Developing apps, creating immunotherapies, digital marketing, and there are many other capabilities like this. 2/3 of jobs in the US today have to do with creating knowledge of some sort. Almost all of these jobs did not exist 25 years ago. That has always been a political issue. And the moment you can't describe jobs of the future because they haven't been invented yet, so people can't describe them, yet they are coming. The economy is shifting to a place with a greater premium on entrepreneurship, creativity, adaptability. So now is the perfect time to be an inventor and an entrepreneur. The tools to change the world are already in our hands. We just need to be courageous and question assumptions that limit our imagination to solve problems. Thank you very much.
Спасибо, Рэй.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you so much for your address, for your talk. Ladies and gentlemen, we have some time for 3 questions. A lady on the right, raise her hand first, please.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Максим Бекинев.
Hello, my name is Maxim Bakanov, and my question is as follows. You said that AI will be an extension of a human brain. And in the history of humanity, we had mechanical extensions, technological extensions that made us stronger or faster. But those are quantitative changes. With AI, we are talking about qualitative changes. If AI becomes human-like, if it becomes smarter and more powerful than a human being, because it will be combined to all of the devices out there, why then do you expect that the servant will remain the servant? My experience speaks against it. When the servant becomes more powerful and smarter than its master, it becomes the master. And in this case, the humanity will be left behind the AI. It will be left at the mercy of AI. And we do not know whether it will have us here on the planet or not. What do you think about that?
Answered one of the most important questions, because people see AI as something different from ourselves. It's kind of over there, and if it's doing a better job than humans, then why do we need humans? But that's not my view. That's not how it's happened already. We have tremendous amount of AI in this, and not only in this, but in the cloud that it connects to. And we use that every day. And we're going to continue to do that, even when the connection goes directly from our brain to the cloud. So the cloud is not something over there that competes with us. It's becoming part of who we are. We're becoming greater than we are before. And that's already true. Just think about what you can do with all the technological advances that we connect to through the cloud that we would not be able to do otherwise. So we are already substantially enhanced. And when we can connect directly from our brains, and our brains are performing far greater things than we could ever do before, when we get to the 2030s, it's going to make us more established. I mean, that's why we create these tools. It didn't come from Mars. The intelligent machines didn't arrive here from Mars. We created them ourselves in order to do things that will make us more intelligent. So that's a key thing. It's not they're creating these machines and they will displace us, although you can certainly point to examples of that. We're going to actually make ourselves far greater than we were before by combining with AI.
Спасибо, спасибо большое. Есть еще.
Thank you, Ray. We have one more question, please.
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Maria, and my question is following. As you already mentioned, technology is growing exponentially, and so I wanted to ask you which 5 emerging technologies, in your opinion, will change our world in like 10, 15 years, apart from health tech, and what frameworks are useful in studying them?
Well, I mean, we're learning how to do just about everything with AI, certainly in HealthWorks, but in every other area. And as I said in my answer to the previous question, we're going to enhance our ability to do this by merging with AI. And you can already see that's the case. I can do things that I could not do without this. And as this becomes greater and it actually goes directly from our brain to the cloud, we'll be able to do things we could never do before. I mean, just think about playing Go. If you wanted to be the best Go player in the world, you were a human and you could outperform everybody else. That's no longer the case. And the key player that's best human being to play Go doesn't want to perform anymore because machines are doing better. But ultimately, we're going to actually enhance our own capabilities. And this will be in every area. There's new forms of art where you can create art through a human being connecting to a machine and doing things that they could never do before, but also using the art ability of the human. And ultimately, everything we do is going to be really an enhanced version of a human being connecting to a computer and doing things that would otherwise have been impossible.
Спасибо, спасибо большое. И последний вопрос.
Thank you so much. And we have one last question.
Hey, my name is Aslan. I'm representing a corporation. And my questions...
I can't hear.
do you hear me? Hello? По-русски говорить, что ли?
Я думаю, по-английски тоже сойдет.
Окей, должен понять. My question, it seems to be very well on the ground, but we innovators or startuppers regularly meet rigidness, we meet poor understanding of the innovation, why it is needed, etc., all this resistance and reluctance. What would be your recipe to overcome it, not because just Ray Kurzweil said it's good, but to make it go deeply into the mind of a resistor, of the one who is reluctant? And you spend most of your time winning this, stopping this resistance.
Well, that's always a challenge to being an innovator, that other people don't really see your vision of the future. I started doing innovations in the 1960s. There was actually no tradition of that. Nobody understood being an entrepreneur at that time. Now at least you have a lot of people that understand innovation. You can see 5,000 people at this conference shows that people really do understand it. A lot of people don't, but if you look around, you'll find other people that support your vision and try to show your vision, even if you can't demonstrate it because you want to start before it's feasible. But you can get other people that will support it. And that didn't used to be the case. I mean, nobody was supporting innovation if you go back a number of decades. And so you come to a conference like this, talk about your innovations, people will celebrate it.
Спасибо, Рэй. К сожалению...
Ray, thank you so much. This is it. We don't have any more time left. We would like to continue, but we cannot. Thank you for answering our questions. And thank you very much to Jaishi Seth. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for inspiring us. Now, wrapping this up, I would like to ask Arkady Dvorkovich to come to the stage. Arkady, we've discussed how to find the best trends, how not to miss out on these trends, how to ride this wave of innovation. But there is always that fear of making a mistake, not investing enough, not working hard enough. Is that something which pulls you back? How can you overcome that fear of missing something, overestimating your abilities? Well, fear is what keeps us going. Fear drives innovations. We talked with the head of American Telecom, and he agrees. We're driven by fear. We are scared of disappearing. We want to survive, and that is why we are growing, we are evolving. And I agree with Ray. There are people who understand innovations. People sometimes get scared. They're afraid of many things. To fight that fear, we need innovations. With innovations, we conquer new heights. We get result. We're afraid of being the last one. That is why we are racing to be the first. This is it. Thank you so much. Good luck to every one of you. This is the end of our session. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to Skalkovo. Stay healthy. Goodbye.
Ну что ж, друзья, это было очень...
Well, it's been an immensely interesting session. Thank you, my dear colleagues. Speakers, thank you. I really liked it. I think this session has been a very good wrap-up to our today's agenda and to the whole forum as well. Best of luck to you. We wish you a very happy and successful year. We'll meet you next year at the next Startup Village in 2022. We'll be marking our anniversary. It will be an anniversary conference. And now it's time to thank our partners, without whom this event would have not happened. Huge thanks to our main co-organizer, Web Ventures, Web RF Group. Our strategic partner, State Corporation, Roscosmos, Russia Space Agency. Our general partner, VTB Bank. Our official partner, Gazprom Bank. Our special partner, Department for Entrepreneurship and Innovation of Moscow. Our ecosystem partner, MTS Startup Hub. Our official water partner, PepsiCo, Tinkoff, infrastructure and educational programs at Rosnano, SAP, Accenture, and many others. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. See you next year.
Жажда веселья, жажда путешествий, жажда общения. Утоляй любую жажду с освежающими вкусами Липтон. Мой любимый персик.
При низких температурах окружающей среды тела быстро теряют энергию. Но нахождение вблизи источника тепла позволяет телу получать тепловое излучение. Происходит самопроизвольное перераспределение тепла. Следовательно, когда источники тепла находятся вместе, их энергия побеждает холод. Лучшее создается вместе. Газпромбанк.
МТС Стартап Хаб. Работа с реальным бизнес-заказчиком МТС. Доступ к ресурсам самого крупного телеком-бренда в России. Не можешь поверить? А в твой стартап обязательно поверят. У нас есть все, что тебе понадобится. Ресурсы, клиенты, технологии, каналы продаж. Мы оценим твой продукт, правильно применим в своем бизнесе и масштабируем на мировой рынок. МТС Стартап Хаб ждет тебя и твоих нереальных бизнес-идей.